Today I wanted to do a video really not for the experienced shooter at all. It's for the novice shooter or for the person who's seen the likes of tactical scopes on TV or wherever type thing, and they are all looking at getting into it. And really, I'm answering some of the questions that we get in the simplest fashion I can think of doing. Essentially, it's how to use the basics of how to use a tactical scope. And that is that they, as much as they look the part, they don't operate properly unless you use them properly. In the basics of it, you need to adjust your scope, and adjust this dial up here, to suit what you're shooting at, or the distance you're shooting. Now, there's lots of different details, there's lots of far more technical things we can go into, but in the very basics of it, the average scope will be set up at around 100 yards to 100 metres in the way of where their zero is. That means that when the scope is on zero, back down on zero, that it will shoot dead straight right to 100 yards or 100 metres. Some scopes will be set up differently. That really comes down, it can be set up to pretty much anywhere, but that really depends on the particular scope. But for today's purposes, we'll go with the normal, which is 100 yards. Beyond that distance, essentially because the nature of a bullet is not a laser beam, it doesn't travel dead flat. It travels very quickly, but it doesn't travel dead flat. It's always falling. It's just like throwing a rock. They seem to go straight for a while and then they start to fall. In truth, they're always suffering from gravity, so even when they come out of the muzzle, they're dropping a little bit. So that means that they'll shoot dead straight to where they're zeroed to, so where it's all worked out to hit dead right on the target. Beyond that point, they're going to shoot lower. So what we'll do in the video is go through and show essentially shooting at a greater distance and see the bullet drops lower. Then what we do to rectify that. Now, what we need to do that is essentially adjust this scope. We need to adjust these dials, well, this is actually the elevation turret. We need to adjust it by a set amount. Now, nowadays you can get information from all sorts of places. Real information is gained by your own data, your own rifle, your own load, knowing exactly where it hits. And then you'll end up with, in one form or other, a data sheet. I have one here for this round and this rifle. And for today's purposes, I've gone through and simply jotted down what I need in the way of the targets at 100 yard, which is obviously no adjustment, 400 yards, which is 6 MOA, I'll discuss that in a little bit, 800 yards, which is 21. Now, to do that, we simply, once we go to shoot to 400 yards, let's say, which is the 6, we'll take the dial and we'll adjust it from the 0 and take it up to the 6. And at that we should shoot right on our 400 yards. Same thing to go to our 800, we'll take it and turn the dial around. In this case we get 1 revolution is 20, we want 21, so it's 1 revolution plus 1. And that should give us right on 800 yards. I'll wind it back down to 0, so we'll start at 100 yards, you can see that. And what I'll also do is show you shooting at, leaving it on 0, as I've seen people try to do, and shoot out at 400 yards. We'll see if you can see the impacts as to how low it shoots when you don't adjust your dials. So that's basically the description of what we're doing today. I did touch on what this information actually is. Written on the side here, it isn't just random numbers. Well, in some very cheap scopes it might be, but in any decent scope, those numbers are something. As you'll see on the side of this scope, it says 0.25 MOA. The 0.25 is describing each one of those little marks. The numbers are actual MOA, which is minutes of angle. I'm not going to get into the technical description of that, but what I would say is that if you are gaining data, if it's your own data, okay, it just suits up with your scope. But in a way of making it transferable or making data that's relevant, you'll find that you can use either mil radians, mil rad, mil, all the different ways of saying that word, or MOA, minutes of angle. I'm a minutes of angle man, that's what I tend to use, but you need, what I'm really saying there is you need to make sure that what your scope is in and what your information, what your data's in are the same. as they are dramatically different if not used that way. But essentially we'll go through and show that. It's like I said, it's just a basic explanation just to try and help people to make sense of how you're adjusting this stuff. Where your information comes from is a far more in-depth conversation, but you'll still see the direct relevance between the right information, adjusting to suit, and then shooting at the target. And the difference of not doing that and how much different that actually makes. When you're ready.
Yep.
Now I'll move this target, the scope up to 400 yards. And as you can see there, I've got the crosshairs smack on the target. Just I'm using a whole scope pointing at the target. Now I'll fire it at that. You ready?
Yep.
Okay, now as you saw, that shot very low. For 400 yards I need 6 MOA of adjustment. Now we've got nearly no wind, so we're not going to bother with wind today, which is where we'll start to adjust the side dial. For the top dial, we're simply going to adjust. So we're going to take our 0 here, and we're going to turn that into a 6. Wind round to 6, and now we'll try our 400 yard target again. Okay, so now that hit just like it's supposed to, as you can see. So we're now 800 yards, a lot further, it's a long way away, but it's the same process. We now want a 21. We have our data, and that says we want a 21. So go round to our dial, we get back to 0, that's actually 20 on this one, 19 and 0, so 20. So now we'll go to 21. Now we'll move ourselves up to our 800 yard target.
Yep. Hit.
It normally takes a little bit more than that exactly, but our data's pretty good, and our conditions are pretty good. So I hope that helps some people who have asked some questions, and maybe something can use to describe to people who really don't do anything with it and would like to see a little bit of how the scope works.